Hey guys, it's Sean from Shootie School. Today we're working with action strikes by Native Instruments. This video is lengthy, so keep an eye out for navigation on screen or in the description if you're looking for a specific answer and not wanting to learn action strikes from A to Z. Here I'm working in Komplete 10 Ultimate. If you have Komplete 11 Ultimate, action strikes, contact player, and complete control should look and operate exactly the same. I'm working in complete control version 1.8.1 and the contact player version 5.6.6. and action strikes 1.2.0. Keep in mind to hit the pause button on this video if I start moving too fast. Here we go. You can load up action strikes in the contact player or in the complete control plugin. Just take note, you can access the action strikes manual here in the contact player, and I recommend reading through it. But when using the contact player for action strikes, if you're using any complete control keyboards, the keys will not light up corresponding to the MIDI maps. All the keys will just be blue. But in the contact player, you can select in the layout menu the keyboard option. And now this little and interactive keyboard graphic appears that can trigger sounds and show the colored MIDI map layouts. Now when you're using the complete control plugin, it's the opposite. There's no place to access the action strikes manual, but your complete control keyboard will light up corresponding with the action strikes MIDI map, so you'll know exactly which keys control action strikes without any guesswork. Keep in mind that action strikes does not time stretch its samples depending on your tempo, though you can artificially adjust the pitch here among other master controls. And since action strikes has a lot of sequences you can trigger, knowing how to adjust your tempo is important. I'm in Pro Tools, and the contact player or complete control plugin syncs automatically to my DAW's tempo. So you must change the tempo in your DAW to control the tempo in action strikes. See your DAW's manual to learn how to adjust your tempo. But if you launch the contact player or complete control in their standalone apps, you can adjust their tempo here at the top of their respective interfaces. Action strikes is a cinematic percussion instrument and sequencer. Depending on which of the 3 NKI files you load, ensemble, hits, or instrument, will decide on how it works for you. The Ensemble NKI file is mostly an automated section with the most features, while the hits and instrument NKIs are more of a manual triggering workflow, but not entirely. We'll work through them in order and at the end of the video cover a few global essentials for action strikes. Let's load the Ensemble NKI file first. This NKI file lets you control the high, mid, and low sections of an ensemble simultaneously or individually depending on which notes on your keyboard you trigger. But generically, the low portion of the ensembles are bassy or low-tuned instruments, the high section are high-frequency or cutting instruments, and the mid sections are in between. In the upper right-hand corner of the interface is where you can select the ensemble you want to work with. Each ensemble has different sounding instruments. Let's hold C2 on the keyboard down and hear what the default ensemble 𝗪𝗔𝗡𝗧 sounds like. I prefer to find the ensemble I like the sound of first before I start looking for rhythms that I like, simply because it appears not all ensembles can play the exact same rhythms, which you'll see me cover later. I can audition the 12 different ensembles by clicking the arrow buttons like this. If that's something your computer can't handle, first hit the arrow key, wait for the progress bar above the action strikes logo to finish loading, and then hit C2, for example, on your keyboard. Or if you know which ensemble you want to work with, simply select the drop-down menu arrow and select it. Below the action strikes logo and above the central area, there's a blank space that's not being used. So let's open the info panel and leave it open so you can always see your mapping or rhythm monitor. So let's simply select the small circular I button and then select mapping. If you're not using an NI control keyboard like I am, now you have yet another option to see your MIDI mapped out. Note that you can't trigger anything with this mapping monitor, but it is visually interactive with what you do in action strikes. Keep in mind that we're only talking about the ensembles in the upper right and here in this new small monitor window. We're ignoring the central area for now. In the mapping monitor, you can see the octaves C2 through C5, and each octave has 5 blue keys and 2 green keys each. Take note that each of the 12 ensembles has 5 individual loops you can trigger according to the manual, which is a really loose description. They don't call them loops in the manual, but if you look in the mapping key here in the right, it says all the blue keys on your keyboard are loops and the green ones are hits, so I'm adopting these terms for this video. So we have the 𝗪𝗔𝗡𝗧 ensemble selected. Let's take a look at the C2 octave. It says C2 full ENS, as in the entire 3 sections of the ensemble can be triggered together, the low, mid, and high. And as I said a moment ago, each of the 12 ensembles comes with 5 different loops, and here's where you can trigger them on the first 5 keys of the C2 octave. And I'll play through them real quick. Some of the differences between loops are subtle, and some of them have distinct variations, and you'll notice on the mapping monitor and my keyboard that the keys in the above 3 octaves are triggering and lighting up too. Those other octaves are the 3 individual sections of the ensemble, the low as it says here in the mapping monitor, mid and high. So if we only wanted to trigger one of the 5 loops from the low section, play in the C3 octave. Then in the mid section, the C4 octave, and in the high, the C5 octave. So now you can control just one section at a time and combine loop sections. Say you were trying to build energy in a scene and you start simple in the low section. Not only can you add another section in when you're ready, but you don't have to use the same first loop that the 𝗪𝗔𝗡𝗧 ensemble has to offer. You can mix the second loop from the mid section by hitting G4. And now D5 to get the high section of the ensemble playing. What we're hearing is a custom loop we just made that we couldn't have triggered in the C2 octave. It's a unique loop to what their library offers. Let's switch from the mapping monitor to the rhythm monitor here. Here's where you can use our eyes and not just our ears to know what the loop we're hearing is up to. Let's hold down C2 again so the entire ensemble plays its first loop. Notice in the rhythm monitor the yellow circles move so you know where you are in the loop, which is 2 measures long before it repeats. The blue circles are telling you which section of the ensemble is playing, whether it's high, mid, or the low section. The empty circles are telling you when the sections of the ensemble are not playing, and the dark blue circles are telling you when the sections of the ensemble are playing loudly or accenting. Take note that the dark blue accent circles in the 3 rows are not the exact same thing as the accent symbols in the 4th bottom row, called here ACC. More on that 4th row later. So if you play in the C3 through C5 octaves with the individual ensemble sections like we did earlier, you'll see in the rhythm monitor the custom created loops. Just take note that the circles in the rhythm monitor do not update until you play a loop from the section you want to see. I'm playing D3, now E4, now D5. This rhythm and mapping monitor is an awesome tool. It really lets you see what you're hearing and tells you where to trigger. Now let's hit C2 again to trigger the first loop of the 𝗪𝗔𝗡𝗧 ensemble. I just want us to acknowledge that for the most part, every ensemble comes with its own 5 loops. So with our rhythm monitor up, let's switch ensembles and notice the loops are changing by hitting the arrow button on the ensemble menu. And like I said, for the most part they're different. The first few here are the same, but by the time we get to Rise of the Machines, it's starting to change drastically. So let's recap that each ensemble sounds differently and for the most part has 5 different loops that can be triggered on your keyboard using the blue keys from the octave C2 through C5. In the C2 octave, the entire ensemble can be triggered, and from the C3 through the C5 octaves, the individual sections of the ensembles can be triggered. But not only that, any of the 5 loops can be mixed and matched within the 3 individual sections of the ensemble. So this is quite a lot of content for finding some ensemble loops. Let's not forget about the green keys too. They're single hits, which trigger one of the individual instruments from its corresponding section, whether it be the entire ensemble, the low section, mid, or high. Let me hit record in my DAW. I'm not sure how you would incorporate it, it just seems like a nifty feature. Because in the other NKI files you can really trigger individual instruments in detail, which we'll cover later. But you could put a loop down like C2 and just start ad-libbing the green keys, the single hits. Let's go into my piano roll and check out the MIDI for a moment. C2 is my loop, or the long solid note down here, and the notes above it are the ad-libbed green keys I was hitting. Take note that the dynamics of the green keys responded to how hard I performed on my keyboard. They were pressure sensitive. Down here I can see the dynamics going from weak to strong and so on. Not only that, I can change the dynamics after I recorded them here in my DAW. Let me delete all the ad-lib notes so I only have the loop left to examine. No matter what I do to the dynamics in the editor, the loop will always sound the same. So the green keys or single hits act like most virtual instruments when recording them, but the loops do not and are limited for editing in your DAW. But you can change the loop's dynamics and action strikes. We'll get to that in a bit, so don't worry. So that's about everything you need to know about ensembles, their loops, hits, and how to trigger them. I felt like explaining that ensembles have their own loops before showing you the center area of the interface was the best way to explain where all these rhythms we're hearing are coming from. Because the center area is so large and looks musical, which it is, but it's not the majority of what you hear in action strikes. The center area helps you manipulate the ensemble loops. So explaining in this order, for me at least, will make the next section easier to grasp and not make the ensemble loop seem so mysterious. So let's rock and roll. What we see in the center area here by default is called a rhythm set. It is 5 individual accent patterns, which are 2 measures long, and judging by reading the title of the rhythm set, Basic Accent A16th Feel, they will work well together when composing straightforward 16th note style compositions. The most important thing to remember that will keep you from getting lost or confused is knowing that one of these 5 accent rhythms will be playing at all times, and the only thing they do here is add extra accent notes to your currently playing ensemble loop. The ensemble loops were covered in the previous section of this video. So of all the combinations of ensemble loops we already discovered, now the possibility of those loops just expanded big time with these newly introduced accent rhythms. So each rhythm set has 5 accent rhythms. These are the terms we're using. There are whole rhythm sets and individual accent rhythms. Look next to the first accent rhythm and select the circular C1 button or hit C1 on your keyboard. It's usually already selected by default. Notice that your mapping monitor has a dot on it, meaning it's active where the yellow keys are here. The accent rhythm keys don't need to be held down to use them. Like I said, one of them must be active at all times. Let's look and learn real quick about the first accent rhythm. The staff is the 5 lines that the notes and symbols are on. The first symbol, just below my mouse, is a rhythm clef. Not important, but fun to know. Next is the time signature 4/4, meaning there are 4 beats to a single measure. And then, of course, the notations that represent what accents are being added to your ensemble loops. Let's hit C2 and trigger the ensemble's first loop. Let's switch to the rhythm monitor and now look at that 4th ACC or accent row. Notice the little arrows, then look at the first accent rhythm and note that the arrows there are in the same location, just below my cursor. This is confirmation of what the accent rhythms are adding to the ensemble loops. Let's click on the circular C#1 button next to the second accent rhythm. You heard the amount of accents double and notice the accents change in the rhythm monitor as well. So here's what's at your fingertips. While triggering every or any section of the 5 ensemble loops on the blue keys, you can click or press any of the yellow keys and change the accents in real time of your ensemble loops. The green keys can also be triggered at any time as well. Take note that the 5th accent rhythm for all default rhythm sets is an ending accent rhythm. They're super cool because they're well thought out punctual endings. But keep in mind, after you hit the ending accent rhythm, which is E1, it will play the ending accent rhythm but not loop it, even when you continue to hold the key down. So that's how you trigger accent rhythms from a rhythm set. To check out other rhythm sets, use the arrows here in the top left of the central area. I'm pressing C2 and clicking the arrow. This is how you can audition the rhythm sets in order. The titles will help you predict what they might sound like. If you click the magnifying glass in the upper right of the center area, now you get to check out all 32 rhythm sets in a list view, and we can use the buttons at the top to sort the criteria. If I'm looking for the feel of 16th notes in 4/4, I click the corresponding buttons and now have less rhythm sets to sift through. Or if I change my mind about the search, I could click on the same buttons again to deactivate them and start my search over. When you find the rhythm set you want to load, simply double-click on it, or select it and hit the check button in the upper right. If you changed your mind and don't want to replace your current rhythm set with a new one, you can select the X button in the upper right and no changes would have been made and you'll be back where you left off. I'll select this rhythm set and hit the check button to commit. Now I have Chasing Accent D16th Feel, and I can trigger the new accents with the same yellow keys in the C1 octave. Now that you know what rhythm sets are, how to find them, select them, and trigger the 5 accent rhythms within them, let's focus on just the accent rhythms for a minute and learn how to customize your rhythm set. Let's say you like this new rhythm set we loaded except for that first of the 5 accent rhythms. Let's mouse over that accent rhythm and notice a large tooltip type box showing up. This box shows the name and the time signature of the accent rhythm. Even though there's a small magnifying icon on the right, simply click anywhere on the tooltip box. Now we are in a slightly different interface as before. This interface sorts almost identically as the previous one, minus the combination button. But now, the content is laid out differently. Instead of seeing the 32 rhythm sets, now we see all the individual accent rhythms outside of their rhythm sets. And if you refer to the names of these accent rhythms, basic 8th feel for example, you'll be able to tell which rhythm set they came from if you wanted. What's cool about this interface is when you click on a pattern, it will audition the accent rhythm right away. Pretty awesome. Not to mention show you the rhythmic accents in the staff above, so you can really sort through the content thoroughly to get what you're looking for. Let me grab this chasing 16th feel here. I've selected it and can hear it, and then double clicking on it or hitting the checkbox in the upper right to load it. Now notice the name of our rhythm set is changed to custom. We have combined our new accent rhythm with a default rhythm set, giving us the ability to create our own custom rhythm set. You can repeat these steps if you choose with the next 4 patterns. I'll just choose a different ending real quick. I'm mousing over and clicking on the ending rhythm accent. Now I'm looking for a new one that has the word ending in it, so I know it will contain a finale type performance. Doing this, you may find, if you spend enough time under the hood here, that there are less endings that you would imagine. The rhythm sets included with action strikes tend to share the same endings. That's why there's fewer endings to choose from. Just a note for you. I'll sort by triplet and select a triplet ending. I've heard it audition and I'll double click to commit to it. And there it is, our new custom rhythm set. So now we know how to customize our rhythm sets, right? Well, almost. If you look under the center area, the rhythm 1 through 5 button is selected by default, which is what we see in the center area. Select the button to the right of it, which is rhythm 6 through 10. Notice that it's 5 blank staves, and it always will be by default. Here you can select yet another 5 rhythms of your choice to finish your custom rhythm set. I'll choose one quickly to show you the workflow a last time. Mouse over the staff. Clicking on the staff. I'll randomly select a new rhythm and double click it. Also note that on my keyboard, F1 is lit up, indicating that accent is now mapped on my keyboard. Lastly, you can always unload a rhythm by clicking on it and selecting none at the top left of the list. Or if you decide you don't want to replace a rhythm or select none, hit the X in the upper right corner and no changes will be made. Keep in mind, if you select none, you won't be able to use that accent rhythm slot since it appears that the Action Strikes Ensemble NKI always needs an accent rhythm playing at all times. If you unloaded every accent rhythm from the rhythm set, the loops won't work anymore. Only the hits will work. It would be a cool feature to simplify the program and let you play the ensemble loops without accent rhythms. It would be nice to see things like this addressed in updates. Let's load up a fresh Ensemble NKI file by double-clicking on it. Now in the upper left we have the accent and expression controls. The wheels on your keyboard should control these, but rest assured, you can simply use your mouse to manipulate them by clicking and dragging, but not just clicking. The top one says MODW, meaning modulation wheel. It controls the overall dynamics of the ensemble loops. I'm using my keyboard wheel. And now I'm using my mouse to adjust it. Now the pitch W slider, which means pitch wheel, it controls only the dynamics of the accent rhythms you're using in the central area. You can see the pitch wheel graphic pulsing with the accents, which is visually helpful. When we slide it up, the accents come alive with louder dynamics or louder hits. When we let go of the pitch wheel or leave it in the middle with our mouse, we hear the intended velocity from native instruments, which is also where it rests when you let go of the pitch wheel on your controller. And when we pull it back, we hear the accents starting to go away. So the upper left accents and expression control can really help you build your performance and tweak your main hits. Dynamics on the blue loops keys and the yellow accent keys can only be controlled by the mod and pitch wheel. There's no pressure sensitivity or dynamic control with your controller keys or DAW, as explained earlier in this video. Now we'll look at the 2 buttons we haven't covered yet at the bottom of the interface. In the bottom left, if you select the playback button, you'll review a few extra options. Under trigger mode is important. Let's keep an eye on the rhythm monitor for this part. Phrase sync, which is checked by default, meaning no matter when you hit one of the blue keys while you have a loop playing, it will always switch in time and seamlessly at the time in the measure in which it was hit. Just take note that when changing loops, do not release the previous loop prematurely or the sequence will stop and start over again like this. Always select a loop, Then select your next loop before releasing the previous loop, as you can see me doing, also known as legato. Selecting the free trigger option means there will be no seamless switching of the patterns, and the loop will always start at its beginning and precisely at the time you play it. It may turn into a bad idea to use free trigger if your timing is not perfect, and if you're playing to a metronome, for one example. Moving on, in the middle you have a feel knob, and note that it says 16th swing. This knob will push your 16 notes out of time in a creative manner. Take note, you will not hear any difference while listening to straight 8th notes. And turning up this knob for anything besides straight 16th notes may produce some unintended results, so use your ears before signing off on your adjustments. And lastly in this area, the tempo setting. It's simple. Half time simply means you hear your loops and accents twice as slow, regular time means you hear them as they are intended, and double time means they're twice as fast. Now lastly, and with a lot of great features to add to what we've already discovered, the Ensemble and Mixer button located at the bottom right of the interface. This is where you're allowed to do some tweaking. In the middle, darker blue area, you have 3 channels. These channels control the 3 different sections of your ensemble, low, mid, and high. Use the drop-down menus to load a different section from a different ensemble, which will give you a custom sounding new ensemble. The option to mix and match ensembles is pretty sick. But there's one problem which I'll try to explain. You don't need to understand this unless you're comfortable with action strikes already, but I feel the need to point it out. As I said, the mixer can control the low, mid, and high sounds of an ensemble, giving you a custom ensemble sound. And as we can see in the mapping monitor, our octaves of our keyboard C3 through C5 can control the ensemble section rhythm loops individually, as we covered earlier in this video. And playing and mixing these blue keys on the C3 octave and above will give us custom loops. As we look at the rhythm monitor, we can see the individual high, mid, and low sections update as I play. Keep this in mind as I go back to the mixer to set up a custom ensemble sound. Let's hold down C2 on your keyboard. Now let's change the low section of the ensemble to War Ensemble! Because Slayer rocks. And let's change the highs to Monster Attack. Now we've completely changed the ensemble sound dramatically from what we've been hearing this whole video. And easily. It's awesome. Well, it's also confusing. Let's hop back to the rhythm monitor for a second and take a mental picture of what it looks like. Take note of how many 16th notes are missing from the lows, and look at the few 16th note gaps in the mids. Now let's switch back to our mixer and put the low section of our ensemble back to Dark City. And now we go back to the rhythm monitor again. Look. 16th notes have been added to our low, and some of our mid notes have moved. Now we did not change any loops or rhythm accents. All we did was assign a different sounding ensemble section, not even an entire ensemble, and the rhythm changed on us. We changed just the sound, but the rhythm changed. What makes less sense is we changed just the low section of the ensemble, but not only did the lows change, the mids did too. In my opinion, this is a hot mess of sequence spaghetti, making keeping track of your loops a huge headache, which is why I prefer to get my sound of my ensembles first, before searching for loops and accents. There is no explainable workflow from Action Strikes about this, and after testing this out, mixing many different ensemble loops with ensemble sections, and then adding ensemble accent rhythms, there's just no tangible way to keep track of what loop does what to what accent to what ensemble section. You gotta be Rain Man to keep track of it. Now you know, watch out. Let's continue with the mixer. The first knob on each channel is the reverb send, just for that section of the ensemble. We can choose just to have the low ensemble have thick verb and the rest more dry, like this, which is pretty rockin'. Keep in mind that the fader over here is a master fader for the reverb. If it's not up, you won't hear any of the channel's reverb settings, even if the channel reverb knobs are turned up. Next is the stereo knob, and you should note, it's not a traditional pan knob. Turning it left doesn't send the signal to the left channel, or right to the right channel either. When you turn the stereo knob left, it makes that ensemble section entirely mono. In other words, no stereo image, the signal just comes right up the middle. And the more you turn it right, the more of a stereo image you'll hear. If you're viewing this video or working on a laptop, cell phone, or tablet, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference here. Properly set up speakers or headphones will reveal its effect. Moving along, the delay knob works like the reverb knob. Let's turn them up to 12 o'clock on all 3 channels. But take note of two things. By default, the delay master fader may not be up, so you'll never hear the delay effect until you turn that up, like this. Also, the delay might not even be engaged depending on which ensemble preset you're on, so with that in mind, we'll get back to delay in a minute. After the delay knob is the mic knob. Moving it left towards close will give you a more direct sound, and moving it right towards room will give you more of an ambient sound, a great feature to use in conjunction with the reverb. Sometimes you want a natural room sound here, sometimes you want a reverb effect here, or the combination of the two. And lastly, on the ensemble channels is simply a volume fader, so you can mix the volumes of the individual ensemble sections. Now, looking at the bottom, the Master Effects tab is showing. On the left are the pass filters. Engage them if they're not already on. High pass means the high frequencies are preserved and the low ones are cut out. The high pass knob turned all the way left does almost nothing. But as you start turning it right, the low end of the entire mix will start to get cut out, leaving our mix with less and less bass as we continue turning. A quick hint for amateurs. If you don't use a subwoofer at your workstation, you may not realize how much bass Action Strike produces, or your music. And until you have access to one, be careful on how much bass you add or even decide to keep in your mix. Screening your movie for the first time before testing it on a subwoofer, you might learn some tough and surprising lessons. So with that said, the high pass filter knob is a quick way to dial out that low end or even use creatively on occasions. And the knob below it is the low pass filter. This low pass filter does the exact opposite as the high pass filter. It preserves the low frequencies, and as you turn from right to left, it starts cutting out the high frequencies. You can use it as a tool or creatively, as mentioned about the high pass filter, though not nearly as important as taming that bass in my opinion. Next is the EQ section. The top row of knobs is for bass frequencies and the bottom is for high frequencies. For me, that seems a little backwards, but it could just be my preference. The first knob in each row is a gain knob, and it turns the volume of the selected frequency up or down. The second knob chooses the aforementioned frequency. And the last knob will help you either pinpoint a specific frequency even more by turning it left, or if you turn it right, it'll be more like a ballpark adjustment. The next section is transients. The attack knob is for getting more defined or articulate hits from your percussion. Listen close to notice a difference. And underneath is the sustain knob, which will let percussion and instruments ring out for longer duration. Again, you must listen closely in some cases to hear a difference. And as for the compressor, I urge you to research using compressors. I will not cover it in detail due to non-obvious results. Just know that any compressor is trying to even out dynamics from a volume standpoint. You may like the tone of a low dynamic hit, but it might not have enough volume to be heard, for example. So Google is just a tab away. Go rock it. Now that we've finished with the Master Effects tab, just to the left of the tab there are low, mid, and high section tabs. Go ahead and check them out. They look exactly the same as the Master Effects section, except they only affect a specific section of the ensemble that you have selected. It's a pretty awesome feature to have this much control, and you already know how to use it since we just covered all these controls in the Master Effects tab. So let's go to the Send Effects tab and click on it. If you've turned up the delay knobs on your ensemble channels above, turned up the master delay fader to the right, and engaged the delay button here in the delay section, we should be hearing some delay by now. Unfortunately, this effect does not have the option to sync to your host's tempo. So the first knob, you have to use your ears for what you want, and this knob represents how much time goes by before you hear the echo of the delay. The second knob, feedback, decides how many echoes you will hear. Setting this all the way left will simply render the effect useless. Setting it all the way right will make it repeat forever or until humans don't exist anymore to hear it. So finding a sweet spot between all the way left and all the way right is what you're going to do in most cases. And lastly, the damp knob. It's like a tone knob, but only for the echo of the delay. Turning it all the way left means it's not doing anything, and as you turn it right, it will start to dampen or muffle the sound of the echo. I needed my headphones just to be able to hear the minute difference. And over here to the right is the reverb section. It's very simple. Engage it in the upper right if it's not on, and select the type of reverb you want by using the left and right arrows to audition the options in order, or choose the drop-down arrow to select the reverb you're looking for. Remember, if the channels above don't have the reverb knobs turned up and the master reverb fader to the right isn't turned up and the reverb switch in the effects send isn't engaged, you will not hear it. And lastly, for the Ensemble NKI, the Master Fader. The volume of everything you do and every adjustment you make all combines together and can be controlled here at the Master Fader. Let's keep moving. Now let's load the Hits NKI file. It is simple but great since it lets you access all the individual instruments of each hit set and play them individually. You can access each hit set in the upper right, or access them in the upper left in the central area here to change hit sets. Unfortunately, there's no mapping monitor in the Hitsets NKI, so if you don't have a complete control keyboard, you may want to load hits up in the contact player and view the interactive keyboard from the layout menu here. Now under the hit selection section in the center area, it will tell you which instrument of the currently selected hit set is. You can use the arrow to select the next instrument in that hit set, or, much better than that, as long as the auto follow input switch is activated, you can just press a key on your keyboard, and whatever instrument you trigger will come up in the hit selection area. I'll hit the first red key on the left, which is Big Metal Hits. Now that the instrument has been selected, the right side of the central area called Hit Settings will now let you tweak just that hit selection, not the entire hit set. It's really cool. So we can control the volume of the instrument, and in the bottom right you can control the mic knob, which they work the same as before. But what's nifty is the pan knob and the tune knobs. Unlike before, this is a traditional pan knob. Turning it left sends the signal more or entirely to the left channel, and turning it right to the right channel. You can view the meters up here in the contact player or in complete control for confirmation of your stereo output. And then the tune knob is a new feature where you can artificially adjust the pitch of each instrument. If I wanted to keep adjusting the hit settings for the Big Metal Hits hit selection, but want to jam on the rest of the hit set to hear how they work together, I could deactivate the auto follow input switch before hitting any other keys. Now when I trigger other instruments, the hit selection and hit settings will not change from Big Metal Hits, and I can continue to tweak the hit settings for the Big Metal Hits instrument while hearing the rest of the hit set being triggered. That's a mouthful, but verbally accurate. Ugh. Take note that from what I've experienced, you cannot combine different hit set sections like you could with the Ensemble NKI, or combine instruments from different hit sets and make your own custom hit set. Though you could simply work with more than one instance of action strikes if you really needed to access more than one hit set at a time. Moving on. Now at the bottom of the center area, we've been working on the Hit tab. Now let's switch to the Effects tab. Under Sound, there's an EQ. Selecting off will leave you with the intended flat mix of the hit set. Selecting 1 in the sound section will boost the high frequencies for a brighter sound, and selecting 2 will boost the highs and the bass but also cut the mid frequencies out, giving it more of a scoop sound or supposedly bigger sound, depending on what you're mixing. And underneath is the dynamic switch. When engaged, it will produce a predetermined amount of compression and envelope. Your sound should sound noticeably louder and more aggressive. And to the right is the reverb section. Turn it on or off by engaging the switch up here. Like before, you can scroll through the reverb options in order just by using the arrow keys here. Or select the drop-down arrow here if you already know the one you're looking for. Unlike the Ensemble NKI, the reverb here is controlled only in one place with this amount knob. The sound and reverb sections are global adjustments for the entire hit set, not for individual instruments or hits in this case. And lastly, in the upper left is the expression setting, which you can control with your mouse or mod wheel on your keyboard. This is a global adjustment for the hit set to control the overall dynamics. You should note that your keyboard can perform pressure-sensitive hits, and that your performance can be manipulated via your DAW after recording it. But not only that, the dynamics you hear with your performance are in combination with your mod wheel, so it's a little weird. You gotta feel it out. So hitting your keyboard hard will give you a louder sound, but it would be even louder if your mod wheel is turned all the way up and vice versa. So that's it for the Hits NKI file. It's simple, yet pretty awesome, since it's the only way you can tweak individual instruments or hits with this much detail and action strikes. Also, if you don't want to resort to using the action strikes loops from the Ensemble or Instrument NKI files, the Hits NKI file is the place to be to create your own loops from scratch in action strikes. Let's find the action strikes Instrument NKI file, double-click on it, and load it up. The Instrument NKI is a combination of the Ensemble and Hits NKI, but with fewer features. If we look in the upper right, we'll see where we can choose from the instrument we want to work with. You can use the arrows to audition them in order, or unlike the previous NKI files, you can click on the name or magnifying glass to open the instrument select interface. We should acknowledge that we are not working with the entire ensembles or hit sets anymore. Now we're working with individual instruments or groups of the same instruments. This interface has a lot of content, but conveniently has a set of buttons at the top that will sort the criteria as we've seen before. And what's most valuable is when you click on a selection, you get to preview what it sounds like before double-clicking on it or selecting the checkbox in the upper right to commit to loading it up. The lethal ethno ensemble does sound pretty lethal. Let's load it up. Take note that in the upper left of the center area are arrows that do the same thing as the arrows up here in the instrument selection area. Next to those, we see the title of the instrument we loaded, and to the right of that, we have a magnifying glass icon that operates exactly the same as clicking on the magnifying glass in the instrument selection area here. And on the far right, which is a relief for me, the info button is back, which when selected gives us back our monitor, except this time the monitor is a combination of the rhythm and mapping monitors we've seen previously. It's good to have you back, man. Notice at the top of the monitor, there's a single line representing the pattern we will be playing and where the instruments will hit or accent depending on what loops we trigger. And below is our trusty MIDI map. I love seeing the monitor up. It's like I have someone else working with me giving me feedback. It's great. Now let's hop in to figure out what we have available. You should note that the color of the keys in the monitor do not represent the same color of the keys in the other NKI files. The yellow C2 and D2 keys are the individual instrument hits that can be used just like the green keys from the Ensemble NKI. They respond to pressure sensitivity and have controllable dynamics in your DAW after recording them. You can also trigger them whenever you want and they will sound only at the exact time you hit them. Next are the green keys, which are rolls and flams. A roll is a sequence of hits, and a flam is usually a double hit that is normally not at the exact same time but still very close together. These green keys respond just like the yellow keys with the dynamics and timing, though it seems the fifth green key is at 100% strength at all times. There's no dynamics. In fact, the main reason for this video is how non-descriptive the manual is. It literally says incorrect things sometimes just to avoid over-explaining things as I'm attempting to do, and in these few cases I hope I'm correct in my analysis. That fifth key bothers me. Moving on. There are almost 3 octaves of blue keys. Unlike the Ensemble NKI loops, where there is not solid continuity of what loop you'll hear depending on which ensemble you selected, all 32 blue keys you see here in the Instrument NKI produce the same loop no matter what instrument you have selected. So there's less content from a loop library standpoint than in the Ensemble NKI, but it's something you can understand right away and grasp and start working with. Hallelujah. One last note. In your monitor, you see the labels on the blue keys saying the basic loops start at C3 octave and the accent loops starting at octave C4. I do not understand the segregation, and using my ears, all the blue keys are simply 32 different loops with accents showing as dark blue dots in the monitor. If you can enlighten my ignorance here, please do so in the comments. The C4 and above loops may have more accents than the ones in C3. I don't know. They all have accents nonetheless. What's the difference? Anyway, now we can choose and trigger our instruments in the Instrument NKI file. Moving on. Now in the upper left with the expression accent section, it works exactly the same as with the Ensemble NKI as far as I can tell, which we've already covered. At the bottom of the center area, we have 2 buttons. Select the playback button if it's not already selected, and notice the trigger mode that has already been covered in this video. The tempo section all the way to the right has already been covered in this video. And in the middle, the feel knob, which has already been covered, except now we have a nifty graphic that will tell us which loop or blue key on our keyboard we're playing, and has a helpful circular animation that lets us know where we are in the 2-measure loop. Now we can select the effects button at the bottom of the center area. Let's just agree that the reverb section on the right is exactly the same as we saw it in the Hits NKI, so that's done. And on the left looks almost the same as the sound section in the Hits NKI, but not exactly, so let's tackle that. If you want your EQ flat, select the off button. Now if you hit the 1 button, it will boost your bass frequencies. Selecting 2 will boost your high frequencies. These buttons look exactly the same as the previous Hits NKI, but do different things. This is why reading the manual is important. Not to understand why they do these things, who knows, but to understand that they did them in the first place. Next is the filter. You need to engage it with the switch. Now this filter will boost what frequency you put it on and cut all other frequencies. Unlike the high pass or low pass filters we saw before, this is to select the frequency you want, whether it's low, mids, or highs, and kill all other frequencies completely. I would guess that this isn't used often, but when scoring or doing effects, it might be a cool trick now and then. And lastly, something we're familiar with. It's just that we're seeing it in a slider format instead of as a knob. The mic position. Close will give you more direct sound. Room will give you more of an ambient sound. Are we done? Just about. That's it for the NKI files. Here's a few key commands you can use in action strikes for the knobs and faders. If you hold Command, which is Control on a PC, and click on a knob, it will reset that knob to its default position so you don't have to turn it manually. If you hold Shift and click and drag a knob, it will turn at a slower speed, which is great for fine-tuning. And if you hold Control, which is right-click on a PC in this case, and click on a knob, a MIDI Learn dialog appears. Now saving your NKI files. If you load a different Action Strikes NKI file, all your work will be lost if you were working on one prior to that. So if you put some time, effort into building your ensembles, hits, or instrument NKI files, you need to save them in the Komplete Control plugin by going to this drop-down arrow and selecting File and selecting Save As. You may want to change the name as not to confuse it with the original NKI file later. And to open that file, you can go to the same menu, except choose Open instead, or you can go to the Komplete Control Users preset, which is this icon here, and see all your presets from Action Strikes, which is really handy. If you're using the contact player, you can click this little disk image, click Save As. Click on the name that pops up, then enter your Finder or browser to name it and choose the location of this file. The default location should be fine if you've never done this before, otherwise you already know what you're doing. To open that file in the future, simply select the disk image again and select Load. Find the file and load it up. At this point, after this video, you can really start being productive with Action Strikes. I did my best to leave no stone unturned while also trying not to make an hour-long video, which I know this is close. So congratulations if you made it this far. And more so of a congratulations if you made it this far and are dominating in Action Strikes with an orc horde army marching in tow. It was my pleasure making this tutorial for you. If you have any corrections to information I presented, or if updates in Action Strikes have changed any info I presented, please leave a comment about it. Or comments and questions in general are always welcome. Please leave them below. Like and subscribe if you got something out of this video. I appreciate your time and rock on.